Nobody, no government, no individual person, no Michael Saylor, no BlackRock, no Larry Fink, nobody can at this point stop Bitcoin. Bitcoin has officially reached escape velocity. It's the number one sovereign monetary asset. And the second best is so far away, you can't even see it. And so this is very important to remind ourselves in those times where Bitcoin price is crashing down. We are 40-50% away from the all-time high, and we are thinking it's all over, it's all bad, and we're starting fighting with each other. We are starting to be not as hopeful as we once were when Bitcoin is at 100, 120, 130K. And that's why today I'm taking the time to talk with Michelle about the current state of Bitcoin, the current state of freedom, and why Bitcoin as freedom technology has reached escape velocity. Enjoy. I think we had now 2 talks, if I remember correctly,
Yeah.
and we always focus around like freedom and the intersection with Bitcoin. And there are constant attacks on it. I personally have this feeling that in some perspectives of our lives, freedom is improving. In some perspectives, our lives is actually getting more limited. And so I'm really curious, before we start talking about anything specific, how you kind of assess the current state of our personal freedoms that you kind of see in our world.
Yeah, well, I'd love to know what you think is getting more free because I struggle with being like super black pilled these days. Um, I'd have to really think about it. I mean, of course we have these like luxuries of the modern world where we can like get on a plane and fly in a way that, historically people couldn't. We have the internet, you and I are connecting across the globe. But I think that these technologies and advancements, we have had them for much of our life and they've sort of settled in. And so if you take a baseline from like even the year 2000 or the mid 2000s and you go from there, which is kind of like my current technology context window, I think in nearly every way our freedoms are under attack and it's accelerating. I don't know if you guys have flock cameras over there. Have you ever heard of this? Um, there's a
I've never heard of a flock
company.
cameras.
So a flock there this is just another tool that they're kind of like rolling out without anyone's knowledge really. Flock camera is a private company here in the United States and there's a map online. I think it's dflock maybe.org. Um, but they're putting these flock cameras. I was just looking at the map the other day of where near me are there flock cameras, and of course they're everywhere. There's 3 routes to where I live, and I have to go. There's only one route without flock cameras now. Um, so they're putting them all over the place. They're signing deals with local police, and they're saying, of course, that this is for our safety. It records all kinds of data about your car and your movement and your license plate. And even there is some technology coming where they can snap biometric data. So this is just one example, right? I mean, our freedom is really like under attack in all of these ways. And unfortunately, it's happening so persistently that I think people have fatigue even keeping track of it. I used to really closely follow all of the FISA renewals. FISA is the warrantless spying program that our fantastic government here in the United States uses to spy on people without a warrant. And every couple years it comes up for renewal. And there used to be this fight with an illusion that perhaps they would not renew the program. And that's not even really happening anymore. I think people have sort of given up. The government has declared that it's national security, that they have these powers, and the people, myself included, are exhausted with fighting it. So we let them spy on us. I think nearly everything that Snowden came out with, all of those programs are still in place today. And if anything, they're like expanded upon. So I'm not real optimistic about freedom. I think the only freedom that is left truly is really like in our real lives. Like, I don't believe that there's any digital freedom. I think every layer of the internet is of and communication. I mean, every layer is really compromised all the way down to the ISP. They're looking at, device authentication. The governments have backdoors to everything. So I have for a long time said and believed that I don't believe online there's any privacy. It's an absolute illusion. But in real life, we can still fight for freedom so that, there's not cameras at all of our routes. And that's my biggest hope is freedom in the real world online, and sort of people kind of taking a step back from these digital matrices and like doing things in real life and living their life locally, and that.
Yeah, it's online. Like when, and I don't talk about that enough, but every time I turn on my laptop or phone or whatever it is, I assume someone is standing behind me. So like,
Yes.
you know how when you are in a coffee and you're doing something on your laptop, you're a little bit more cautious in what you do, even though mostly nobody's looking and nobody cares, most
Right.
likely. But you kind of look, you're like, oh, like, should I open this? Should I, like, the bank things, like, should I do this now and should I do this
Right.
here? All those things. But when you're alone and nobody's behind you, you are doing everything on the laptop and you don't care
Sure.
about your privacy. But actually, someone is always looking, because that connection is like, if you're doing it as, I mean, there's this small case if it's not online and you're on like an isolated thing, but like, what are you doing on anyways if it's not online?
Right.
Playing Snake or something like that. But like, but like, if it's online and most people, 99% of them use it online, then it's connecting and then it's speaking to somebody else, maybe not a person directly, but a server, and that server is controlled
Yep.
by a person. And even if it's end-to-end encrypted, sometimes that doesn't really mean anything. That can
Right.
mean a lot of things. It can be really great, but it doesn't have to mean anything just because it's like encrypted. And so I have this practice of mine, and I imagine some people are standing behind me, like a random stranger, a police officer, all of those things. Can I still do this if like 10 people standing behind me? It's a really weird thing because we shouldn't be like that, and we should just be free and
Right.
like do all those things. But I just do that exercise to be extra cautious. I mean, if you're a public persona that is known with face and name, all of those things are like 10x
Yeah.
the risk. But even if you're not, I think being cautious online with what you're doing, unfortunately, is required. If you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a good practice. I agree with you. It's really unfortunate that that's the case, but I think, it's very accurate. I'm glad you mentioned end-to-end encryption, because there are a lot of like false pretexts out there. Your data is in most cases with WhatsApp and these sort of standard consumer products, it's being scanned before you send it out and it enters the end-to-end encryption. um so yeah, I think it's a good practice to just be extra cautious, and it's very unfortunate. I know that there are people building different tools and freedom tools for freedom online. I'm kind of the resident doomer for claiming that a lot of it won't work, because I've seen too much built in, right? Like when the governments have direct access at the ISP level, like you said, whatever you're doing online, like someone has access to it somewhere. Um, so yeah, abolish the
And
governments.
there's this thing with like technology in general. They're all amazing. Like that we have cameras is really great in one sense, where we like can click pictures. We have those memories. It's a amazing technology, but then it also allows mass surveillance and does all of
Yeah.
those things. I mean, AI is a very popular thing right now, where it's really amazing that you can ask a thing so many questions and you can figure things so quickly out. But then you're giving like 10x the volume of data than you previously gave to Google, which was already too much. Now do an
Right.
AI that has a really clear profile of who you are, what you like, what you don't like, and all of those things. Um, it's like, yeah, okay, if you don't use it, you're lagging behind because everyone is using it, and you have a real advantage if you are embracing new technologies and if you are using it as leverage, as something good for the world of whatever you're doing. But then also you're giving power and you're giving the data to them. So it's really hard, and that's what I meant with like the good and the bad with technology and the
Right.
freedom also. It's like
Yeah.
we have the good, but it comes with that like bad side with it, you know?
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting to me, I think there's a little bit of an age difference between us, and we're crossing this divide where, like, I'm old enough. You mentioned cameras, and I couldn't help but laugh because I was just talking to a friend a couple of days ago about how we found an old picture, like a physical picture that someone had printed at a CVS, and someone was holding a camera, and it was a digital camera. It was probably about the size of an iPhone that you would have today. And that was like peak technology, right? And it was so amazing that we could bring this camera and have pictures and we could go get them developed the next day. So I'm like really showing my age, but the point is that all of this is really new, and it's an interesting like point in time that we're at where kids that are growing up and even people who are maybe 10 or 15 years younger than I am, who grew up when all of these things already existed, they never knew a world without these technologies. Like the kids, a lot of kids don't drink alcohol because they don't want to embarrass themselves because anything you do is subject to being like recorded on someone's iPhone, right? Whereas I used to go out and maybe drink more than I should and be a little embarrassing, but I would go home and no one would ever know the difference, right? There was no chance that it would end up on the internet, let alone like going viral. And so there's a unique group of us who probably like opine a lot about this, but it's interesting to me that like, the world moves on very quickly, and now the generations coming up, they don't even remember that. So there's nothing to compare it against. And I think that that's something that's very interesting. The I agree totally with what you're saying. I think people need to be really careful about what they're giving AI access to. I use AI a lot, but I use it on a specific computer and I don't have it connected to anything. It doesn't have access to my email or my cell phone. And it's wild to me the access that people are giving this thing. I mean, it is like you said, scraping all your data, making a very custom profile, and it reminds me of after Snowden came out and showed that they were spying on all of our emails. People would say, "Well, I don't have anything to hide," and it's like, yeah, but you know you don't have to be thinking that you're hiding something. It gives them total access to everything you're doing. And if they want to come after you, they can create a narrative in any way that they want. So it's very
How do
scary.
you, how do you look at Bitcoin through all of this, where Bitcoin comes in?
It's interesting because Bitcoin is a transparent ledger, right? Like there's really not privacy. Bitcoin is anonymous, but it's not private. So I think in one way we could look at that and say that's okay, and that forces people to think twice. You mentioned like thinking about someone behind your back watching everything they're doing on the computer, and in some ways, like, this is part of a hard money standard where with gold we physically had the coin, and with Bitcoin it's a transparent ledger. So in many cases this to me is a positive. Like if you have governments or nonprofits using Bitcoin, then we should be able to track the money. Like, where do my tax dollars go, right? If they're actually going to build roads and help kids in school, maybe I'm okay with that. But if my tax dollars are going to fake learning centers and illegal immigrants, then that's absolutely not okay with me. So I think, you know, in part, there are benefits to the transparency of it. Of course, there are challenges if people are using Bitcoin, like for payments every day or something. I think the privacy concerns can be solved on layer 2 with Lightning and some of the other protocols that we're seeing. Um, and just like being smart and aware, like having proper management of your transactions and where and how you're holding Bitcoin. Um, so it's not something that I'm overly concerned about. I think there can be good privacy on layer 2 solutions, and that more of that will come down the line, and that at the base layer, forcing transparency was sort of always the point, right? If we're going to separate money and state, then we should be able to see what the state is doing with our money that they confiscate.
We Bitcoiners always preach not your keys, not your coins. But we're giving away all our data to the big tech servers. Your passwords, your identity, your accounts. That's why I personally switched away and started using Proton Pass. Everything is end-to-end encrypted, so not Proton and not anyone else can read your data. And look how simple this is. I just click here once on the login button and I automatically get the passkey sign-in from Proton. With just one click on it, I'm signed in. And of course, it also stores all the two-factor authentication codes. And if my credentials ever show up in a data breach, it warns me so I can act very fast. If you care about holding your own Bitcoin, you should also care about holding the control of your own data. It's the same fight. And the best part is you're not sacrificing your convenience. It's privacy and security by default, and you can start for free right now. And if you want to upgrade to Proton Plus, you get that for just $1 for your first month. Link is in the description and in the pinned comment down below. So go to proton.me/pass/Robin Seyr. Make sure you close your digital front door. It takes you 5 minutes and €0 to start with. Again, that's proton.me/pass/Robin Seyr. Why? And I asked that question because a lot of people like freedom has a lot of faces, and for me, privacy is one of the very important faces of freedom. As like, how do you act when the door is locked and nobody's watching you, versus when there's like 2 people watching you, versus when you are on stage in front of 10,000 people. It's like there's like very different versions of you, and so you should be able to choose how many people are watching you. And so like privacy is very important in my sense. But a lot of people have this attitude of like, oh, I don't have anything to hide, I don't do anything illegal, I'm not doing anything criminal. Why is privacy such a foundational important thing to having freedom in the first place?
It's a big question. It's a very good question. I think privacy is essential if we're going to be free. To me, freedom is really defined as it relates to governments. I think amongst our peers, like we're always free. And who is trying to impose on freedom? My primary concern is always the government. And so if the government is always watching and has all of your data, then people act different when they're being watched. I mean, as you mentioned, if you're on stage or you're in front of thousands of people, you might not be comfortable. You definitely are probably not comfortable like expressing controversial thoughts or exploring opinions that you don't agree with. And this is something we're seeing a lot online. Like people are scared to say what they really think. So I think having people not be scared, especially of their governments, is like of the utmost importance. And so I guess it's really like, to me, that's the biggest problem with the erosion of privacy.
Yeah, it's
If that makes sense.
yeah, it makes sense, and it's really weird because so many people think, oh, I don't have anything to hide. I'm like, yeah, but even if you don't, you shouldn't just say, okay, come in and like watch almost. Like, it's also the thing
Right.
of like, would you have a government official standing every single day, 24/7 in your living room?
Sure.
Wouldn't that
And
be
of
weird?
course you wouldn't. Right. Right. And I think that we should have that right online, you know, because no one would ever allow that to happen in their real life. But we've allowed it to happen online because technology is complicated, and governments and big tech companies are sneaky, and so it has happened, and it's much harder to undo than it would have been to fight in the first place, as it was all being enmeshed together. Um, so, you know, unfortunately, it has gotten to the point that it has, and so now we're looking at, like, how do we undo these things so there's not someone always standing there and watching, or how do we build tools around them, and is that even possible at this point?
And you mentioned something before, so that I don't forget it, that ATMs are getting banned currently, which I find.
Yes.
Are you talking about Bitcoin ATMs or general ATMs?
Yeah, no, Bitcoin ATMs. I do think that a large part of the attack on Bitcoin ATMs is because they are really trying to go after all of the cash, and they want a cashless society, because if there's no cash, then they have a digital dollar, and they really have most of the control that they're looking for in a CBDC. So you have all of these wins in the sense that they're like banning CBDCs. But I've always said, like, if they successfully eliminate cash, they don't really need a CBDC, right? They can use a programmable digital dollar, they can use stable coins. Um, so there's been a really concentrated effort to get rid of cash. And unfortunately, we're caught up in that. They're labeling all of the Bitcoin ATMs as just massive fraud, and the facts don't support that in any way. But there's 3 states that have already outright banned Bitcoin ATMs completely. So we've shut down in those states, and there's a number of other states that are looking at de facto bans, where they put rules in place that are so strict that it doesn't make sense for us to operate there. Um, so, you know, a Bitcoin ATM is the last on ramp for people who operate in cash, for 80 million people who don't have a bank account. Like, how do they buy Bitcoin, right? The regulators are coming in and saying, like, oh, well, why don't they just go on the internet and buy Bitcoin? But a lot of people, especially who are still paid in cash, don't have the access or the ability to do that. And some people just don't want to, right? So why should the government be able to tell us what we can and can't do with our money? It's really, really an assault on our freedom. And I think there's not a large, I just wrote an article for Bitcoin Magazine, and it opens with, you know, there's not a large crossover between people that participate in like cash economies and people that are perpetually online. So there's not a lot of awareness about this, and there's also not a lot of concern about it. But I think that the larger Bitcoin community should be alarmed that the government is coming in and just categorically shutting down an entire portion of the ecosystem. And I think it would be really disingenuous to believe that they're going to stop there. We may be the lowest hanging fruit, but they are certainly not going to stop with ATMs. And so the question is, what is next? Which portion of the Bitcoin ecosystem is going to be shut down next? And where do you draw the line? Where, you know, at what point will it matter to you? Hypothetically, you know.
Is there an official reasoning for banning them? Like like there there has to be kind of a, at least an excuse for that, because I'm feeling like there, like I couldn't think of a single good reason. Even if I'm like steel manning, I'm saying like, okay, what would be because if we think about the cameras in the public
Mhm.
space, I don't like them. I think they shouldn't be there. But I can still man the argument of like safety and like figuring out what are
Right.
criminals. Like I can at least like steel man that argument. With
Sure.
banning Bitcoin ATMs, I couldn't think of a
Right.
steel man argument.
Well, they're claiming it's because of the fraud that does occur. But we actually have one of the, if not the lowest rate of fraud across all financial sectors. And if you look at the numbers, it's very easy to prove. But of course, the governments are not interested in the facts, right? So we've put together a fraud website that you can check out. I can send it to you if you want. It's Byte Federal, and we have a larger coalition that we're organizing, and so there'll be more resources available there soon. But fraud across like the larger financial industries is generally considered acceptable at a rate of between 3 and 5%, right? So JP Morgan, everybody's favorite bank, they had $3 billion in fraud last year, and they just paid some fines and filed some paperwork, and nobody cares, right? Nobody would dare to think to shut down JP Morgan. So 3 to 5% is considered the standard, like acceptable rate of fraud. We know a little bit of fraud is going to happen. And in the Bitcoin ATM ecosystem, it's below 2% by their own reporting numbers, right? So you're looking at like half the amount of fraud. And the reason for that is that we, over the past few years, especially, have become subject to super, super strict regulatory requirements. Um, so there's all of this, what's called EDD, it's extended due diligence. And so there are certain indicators that require this extended due diligence if we believe that someone is being scammed. Um, Generally, we stop most of the scams. So we have a live American-based customer support team, and they call anybody over a certain age using a machine. They go through common scams with them, and we do all kinds of things to stop fraud. Honestly, it's incredible. But the state regulators and legislators don't care one bit about the facts, right? They think that they've just decided, like I said, that we're sort of the lowest hanging fruit. Of course, the fraud always starts with a phone call. So we're getting these phone calls all day long on our phone, and those are scams. They're attempted scams. Um, but the FCC can't be bothered to actually regulate the phone calls. The telecom industry doesn't want to shut down this massive piece of their own business, even though those are actually provable fraudulent phone calls. Um, and then you have a touch point at the bank. So in order to come to the ATM, someone has to go to the bank and get cash out. The fraud's not being stopped there. Um, Perhaps sometimes it is, but generally not. If they make it to the ATM, they've gone through one of these phone calls where it's either a romance scam, or there's all sorts of scams, that types of scam. Um, but they've gone through, the person that's being scammed has gone through all of these different layers. And of course, those layers are not being shut down. They're just shutting down the very last point at which it occurs because it's the easiest thing to do. Um, we saw a big problem a number of years ago with the gift card industry because the scammers would route people to purchase gift cards, and then those would get handed over. But they didn't make gift cards illegal. The gift card industry did a massive educational campaign for about scams and fraud awareness, and we all can use gift cards today. Um, so that's our hope, is that we can pivot to a model like that where we're doing education and we're actually reducing fraud instead of just banning an entire piece of the ecosystem, the Bitcoin ecosystem.
It's this kind of trend which I don't like, from the state of getting dubious state where they are more and more protective, in question mark protective,
Right.
for the citizens. Now, I it's a really hard topic because like I feel like a lot of people don't care about freedom. It's like a very small group of people that fight for it, that stand up for it. Otherwise, it wouldn't be so easy
Yeah.
for them to kind of like creep in. And the hard part for me also is that a lot of the people that get that digital is really difficult, that we need more freedom, that cash is important to have,
Hmm.
that a cashless society is not good because cash is freedom. Um,
Right.
a lot of those put Bitcoin actually in the same camp as like the digital euros and the CBDCs and all of those other things.
Right.
And I have here and there those comments in my YouTube section where I'm like, okay,
Hmm.
they say screw everything digital. I hate that they are all controlling us, and I'm like, you're 100% right, but you should look at that Bitcoin thing
Right.
uh, be, because that might be different for you also.
Mhm.
How do you balance that? Like, because I see a lot of people that are just like against everything that is digital and then like dismissing Bitcoin without even giving it a try as a
Right.
freedom tool, which is extremely important, especially because everything is moving digital. So the freedom solution should also be on digital rails because otherwise we don't have any chance.
Sure. Yeah. This is a hard one because as I have gotten further into working in Bitcoin for um I will just say that I think non-KYC Bitcoin is real Bitcoin, and that is the fight that we should be fighting. It's definitely a challenge. I think there are valid points about Bitcoin maybe being not as free as we would like it to be when all of the traditional financial regulatory structures get implemented on top of it. So all of the BSA requirements, which require KYC and AML programs and all of these spying programs, I think that anybody that cares about freedom, like those are the fights that we should be fighting. If everyone had Bitcoin that they purchased without KYC, just as it was meant to be, peer to peer, we spend it peer to peer, you buy it, whether it's from a centralized person or exchange. Um, that in that environment, then Bitcoin really thrives and functions as it was meant to, as a freedom tool that allows us total freedom. Um, that's not to say that it's not worth buying Bitcoin if you have to do so on a KYC'd exchange. There are still technological, ways to protect yourself and maintain your privacy. It's still the greatest monetary tool that we've ever seen. I mean, when in human history could you take all of your wealth, put it into this technology, and then, you know, take it back off of the internet and cross borders or cross oceans or just cross the street and carry it with you. Or remember some words in your head and fly across the country or flee an oppressive regime and pop back out somewhere else, and you have access to you have financial freedom because you have access to your money in a way that was literally never possible before. So I do believe that Bitcoin is an extremely important tool for people who care about freedom and who are fighting for freedom. But I do wish that more attention got paid to the regulations, the BSA regulations. Somebody just did, I think Marty Bent just had someone on his podcast talking about BSA regulations, and that was a really good conversation. So I wish more people would talk about that. It's definitely something, if there's anything that I've ever been nervous about saying publicly, which if you follow me, is not a lot of things. Um, it's this because this is the thing that the governments really care about. And historically, if you look at the people who've been prosecuted or persecuted, um, it was the people fighting against this. And so there's certainly a challenge to be had there. It's a big fight. But if we just ignore it and allow it to continue to creep into the industry, then we will have a big problem, right? So I think it's super important to talk about and for people to be aware of.
Do you think that physical cash is soon to be gone? Like that we just like have cashless and because that's what I was also kind of asking, like, are they starting to also ban slowly like actual ATMs and just like slowly get
Yeah.
rid of them?
Yeah, well, there's definitely less and less of them. To answer your question, I do think in 10 to 20 years, we'll be completely cashless. And it may not necessarily be an outright ban. It will just be that it's so hard to do that no one does it. And it might not take 20 years. It might be 5 to 10. I'm not sure. Depends, depends. But yeah, there are for sure already less ATMs. There are less banks. We have these like I think they call them neo banks. It's like a digital bank. It only exists online. They don't have any real locations. They don't have ATMs. It's just a place that you like sign up online to get a checking account. And of course, the numbers move from here to there, and that's your bank. So yeah, I believe we are absolutely moving to a cashless society. And of course, you also see them decreasing the limits, right? So I mentioned the BSA requirement, and there are a lot of reporting requirements in the that came down from the Bank Secrecy Act. And there's one, for example, that requires reporting, and it used to be that it only applied to transactions that were $130,000. So when they passed this legislation, they thought, well, this isn't going to apply to very many transactions, so we don't have to worry about it. But the number has slowly moved down and down and down. And now I believe it's at like $3,000. And so the reporting requirement applies to so many transactions. Yeah, so that's one of the like sneaky ways that they're doing these things is they change the numbers, they don't adjust for inflation. Um, and most of this is relevant to cash transactions, right? So they don't, like I said, they don't have to just ban it. They can get rid of the banks, get rid of the ATMs slowly. There are places that don't accept cash. They don't even have, the ability to accept cash, like small businesses. And of course, this is being encouraged, and people who do transact in cash are punished. Um, Speaking of Bitcoin ATMs, the number one thing that gets brought up is like, why are the fees so high? And the reason for that is because operating in a cash economy is exponentially harder and more expensive. So we have all of these massive costs that nobody even considers, whether it's the cash logistics to go pick up the cash, the challenges there. We get charged exorbitant fees by the bank because they don't want to accept cash. They don't like cash businesses. So we pay 100 times what a normal business would pay on a per month basis just to maintain a bank account so that we can do business. Um, we use QuickBooks for certain things, as many people do. There are functionalities in QuickBooks that are shut off because we are a cash business. There's so many things that they use to clamp down on the ability to not only transact in cash, but really like use cash for a business in any way. So yes, I believe for sure they're working to shut down cash and make sure that we live in a cashless society.
Is it hard for you guys to maintain a bank account? Like I hear so
Oh,
many
yes.
stories of like people getting shut down because they have like a Bitcoin transaction. I mean, you must be like a
Yeah.
100x worse target for them.
Yeah, we did at one point have a wall in the office of all of the bank rejection letters. There were more than 200 of them. We've had, I think, infamously, we had 3 bank accounts in 1 week shut down. We would sign up for a regular business account, and do a little bit of operating and they would realize that we had all of this cash and boom, account closed, no questions asked, no answers considered, just we don't want to do business with you. So um we have been lucky to find like one single bank partner. There's a couple of banks out there that are still willing to bank us, but what they're really doing is fighting the war on cash with us. I mean, I would consider our banking partner like a partner in this fight for freedom. That being said, they charge us for the right to access their services, like I said, 100 times what they charge a regular business. So it's still not easy.
That's crazy. I just pulled that up, that chart. I will show you this one here, because this is, I think everyone knows that, but it's just like fun to see a chart also around that, where we see cash being used as payments versus
Right.
credit cards being used as payment. And of course, like 2020 was a massive year for that. I remember
Yeah.
that all the places that, and in Vienna, they're still, in Vienna, we have a coffee culture where the coffee houses here only accept cash. It's been since
Okay.
forever that way. And they actually made it through the whole 2020, 2021 era with like just being cash. But I've seen so many businesses that only had cash before also then accept credit card and also accept this and that. And it's been really interesting to see how cash is kind of eroding away. I can remember, I mean, 2016, for example, I was 18 years old, so like just coming up, just getting my hands on my first money. And so I remember when I was like 14, 15, 16 years old, everything I did was just with cash.
Yeah.
And then you can say, okay, but I was a kid. Now kids have bank accounts with like 12 years
Right.
old. So like I had an uncle of mine, and I have an uncle of mine, and his kid is just turned 14. The kid has a credit card with his own bank account. I mean, the bank account is obviously connected to the parents' bank account, but still, they're now having a card of like paying.
Yeah.
So we are learning already, like young kids, to deal with that. And then obviously, like if you look at the percentage, and so I think they probably don't even have to ban it. They just like
Right.
try to make it as enticing as possible to use credit cards. And at some point, that 14% is 4, 3, 2%. And then they can just say, oh yeah, nobody's using it anyways. It's bad for the environment. It's bad for this. We can save tax money. Like what they will come up with some reason, and all of a sudden it's gone without them
Right.
needing to ban it, without a big uprising like, why did you do that? And all of those things. So yeah, the fight is sneaky, I think.
It is. No, you're very right. In fact, there's a commercial that's running now. I've seen a couple times for some sort of banking institution called Dave, and their logo is just a big teddy bear. So it's very much aimed at children. And I think, they show, if I remember correctly, they show like kids being paid for chores. And it's just an app on a phone. And so, like you said, the kids are not really using cash. It's getting younger and younger that they have access to this digital type dollar or money, and they don't have to just ban it because they know that there would be a true serious backlash, I think. I would hope. But yeah, they just quietly phase it out, and here we are.
Yeah, and
So
that's kind of my message always to the people that tell me, "Oh, screw everything digital." I'm like, physical cash will be gone. I think it's just a matter of time. As you said, it's 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. Even if it's 30 years, it's just a matter of time. I think it's probably closer to five than 30 years. And so what can you do? Yeah, you can do gold,
right,
but like nobody accepts gold. There's a lot more merchants
right,
that accept Bitcoin than gold already, even though Bitcoin is not that old. And so I think fighting for against that digital currencies and fighting against that cashless societies
actually, weirdly enough, a digital solution,
Mhm.
and it's Bitcoin, but it's a long conversation to get someone there because like
Right.
screw digital is like the headline.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with you both that it's important and that it's a challenge. Um, I think showing people is the best. Like I love, especially when there's Bitcoin events, and you can maybe tip your cab driver, have them download Wallet of Satoshi and give them $5 and show them, and maybe they don't understand it all right away, but it sort of plants the seed, and in the future perhaps they'll come back and learn more when they're ready. But it is a challenge to have those conversations because it is hard being online and feeling like there's any privacy or
With Microseed, you can engrave your 12 or 24 word seed phrase, the entire seed phrase, onto a 1-inch small washer. Yes, just one washer. All 24 words on that one washer. You can hide that thing everywhere. And even better, you don't need to buy a new kit every time you have to get a new wallet. You can make unlimited backups because Microseed is not selling the washer. Microseed is selling the device that stamps the washer. So you get the full kit with the device, with the washers, with the hammer, with everything you need to get started today. And you can make with that unlimited amount of backups. Go now to microseed.io. I finally and officially mine Bitcoin. This is not just something to stack more Satoshis, but it's most importantly also to support the network. Individual miners are the ones that keep the Bitcoin network decentralized. And by the way, you get KYC free Bitcoin. That's why I use simple mining. I get an actual proper Bitcoin miner. They set it up for me. They repair it if it breaks down. And most importantly, they let me choose the pool and even connect my own full node. I'm completely sovereign and I'm completely in control, and I can sign up with Ocean, no account needed. I just give them a Bitcoin address and then there's mining going on. No KYC, nothing. So if you're ready to mine Bitcoin, go to simplemining.io, tell them you come from Robin, and let's mine Bitcoin together.
Yeah, and no KYC aspect is like I'm so happy that there are no KYC exchanges, peer-to-peer exchanges, especially currently in Europe. I'm curious actually how it's in the States and Canada also, but here in Europe it gets more and more weird. Now if I just send money, there's a rule called the travel rule, and I have to say
Yep.
who I send it to, and it's like
Yeah.
put the name and that, and I'm like, why do I have to do that? Like
Yeah.
it's just not necessary. And so there's a lot of those KYC things, and they're really cracking down on like non-KYC exchanges and peer-to-peer marketplaces. I mean, I think Vexel is a big fighter in that in Europe.
Mhm.
I think that they're doing a great job in that. There are many others that do similar things, but then it's like, I don't know. It gets harder and harder to like have those peer-to-peer exchanges, because also if there's no ATMs, and in Austria, for example, there's still a lot of ATMs actually, around like 5 minute distance walking from me. There's like 2 Bitcoin ATMs around me, which is really cool. But if they also crack down on those ATMs, then how do you get to the exchange between Bitcoin and cash, or even
Right.
Bitcoin and digital euros, at least in a peer-to-peer manner, without showing your face and scanning your passport and all of those things.
Right.
How is that in the States and Canada?
Yeah, I would say the state of it in the States, is even worse. There's almost no of course, there are ways to work around these if you're really tech savvy, right? But there is really almost no on-ramp that's not subject to the KYC and all this. And I will say, um, the travel rule is part of the BSA that I had mentioned, the Bank Secrecy Act. That regulation is the reason for the travel rule that you're subject to. It is getting implemented further and further into the ecosystem. Um, even so, because I work for what's considered a fully licensed banking institution, I am actually not even supposed to discuss KYC and AML. I luckily have a fantastic employer who cares a lot about freedom. Um, if I had a different employer, I probably would not even be having these conversations. And there are things that legally I'm just not even allowed to discuss. They're part of our KYC AML program. There are things that we do and that all exchanges are subject to do it, like required to do, that we're not allowed to discuss. And so even if I were to air them all out here, it wouldn't just be me that would be in trouble. It would put our entire program at Byte Federal in violation. And so the whole company would end up in trouble. So that's how strong of a stronghold these regulations have. I always wonder, like, why are there not more people having these conversations and raising the alarm and flying red flags? And, because I know that Coinbase and Kraken and all of the other exchanges, anywhere that you go and you have to go through KYC, that's because they have these programs. And I think, unfortunately, it's just because it's too risky. I mean, the institutions don't want to risk their own licenses, right? And I try to walk a really fine line in terms of saying things that I know are publicly available and not specific to our programs and our licenses. But it is it's a tricky situation, unfortunately. And it is getting harder and harder everywhere around the world.
Do you think that Bitcoin might almost be because I think it's a genius design to actually have the base layer so transparent and open, and having ways of being more privacy focused on the second or third layer, with like Lightning and then Fediments and things on top of that, and there's many different developments happening. But it's almost like I describe it as a Trojan horse, because at first you're okay that it's like illegal money, it's like not good, and it's like just for criminals. That kind of evaporated really quickly, because it's just a very bad argument, especially how transparent Bitcoin is. It's like, yeah, of course, it's not like that. And then also with the arguments and the statistics, but it was a pretty long point that was standing in the public personas, with like Bitcoin is for criminals. Now it's like that thing is completely gone, especially now with the president and stuff like that endorsing. It's kind of a hard argument to make now. Is that kind of
their own data proved that wasn't true?
Yeah, and so is that now also kind of the Trojan horse coming into that TradFi system with Bitcoin?
The Trojan horse of
Bitcoin being a Trojan horse into the normal system, because it doesn't look like illegal money.
I hope that Bitcoin is the Trojan horse that ultimately separates money and state. I hope that there are still enough Bitcoiners who care about that as the end objective, and that we can truly achieve it. And I still remain, if there's anything that I'm optimistic about, it's that. Because I think there are a lot of us, and there are still enough of us that is possible. I don't care one bit about the ETFs and all of the like treasury companies. I think that has been a huge distraction, but it was also inevitable. We waited for a long time. You mentioned the fraud narrative. Well, they weren't going to have ETFs on Wall Street for fraud money, right? That is only for criminals. And so in one way, that was a winning narrative for Bitcoin, was that even Wall Street is using it. Like, oh, Wall Street is promoting it. So institutional adoption was sort of something we were kind of always waiting for as a big step forward in the adoption curve, but it, it's of course is not the thing that I care about. I would say much, but actually not at all. I don't care at all about institutional adoption. I'm glad that we have come through this phase. I think we're still pretty deep in it, where a lot of the talk and the focus is on institutions acquiring Bitcoin, institutions, how they're using it, different vehicles, things like that. And again, I think it was necessary and inevitable. So I'm glad that we're going through that. But I also really enjoy spending time with and talking with my Bitcoin friends who still care about separating money and state. And I think that as the institutional fuss settles and it becomes less of a conversation, that we will see like a resurgence of the initiatives to separate money and state. And it will absolutely have been the Trojan horse that, we've all been waiting for.
Is there a danger that people focus too much on institutional buying, treasury things, ETFs, and Bitcoin and exchange, and like everything basically that is not Bitcoin in self-custody and running your own node?
Yeah, it's really antithetical to all of the reasons that Bitcoin was created, right? So it's hard for me to say that it's a danger, because I feel very strongly that people should be able to do whatever they want. Like if they want to put their money in ETFs and do all of these dances with the institutions, like I'm not going to say that they can't do that. So I don't know if dangerous is the right word, but it's absolutely a distraction. And I think what's important is that we make the distinction that you can do all of those things, but to me, that's not a Bitcoiner. That's not somebody like, to me, a Bitcoiner, at least traditionally, is like somebody fighting to separate money and state. And then of course, people get mad online and say, well, Bitcoin is for everyone and you can do anything you want with Bitcoin. Of course, that's true. Like that goes without saying. So if you want to play fiat games with institutional Bitcoin, that's fine, but that's really not why Bitcoin was created, and it's not why I'm here. So, I don't know that I agree that it's dangerous, but it's certainly a huge, huge distraction. And I just choose to like give it no time and no energy. I pay a little bit of attention just so I understand what's going on. Other than that, I couldn't care less. You're participating in the traditional financial structures. I just think that people need to be clear that that's what they're doing, right? They're not stacking Bitcoin. They don't have their wealth in cold storage. Their wealth is confiscatable. And they're like playing games to earn more dollars, which is fine. You're free to do that, but you're not going to end up with more Bitcoin because you played institutional games.
I think that's a very logical view, a very based view on like Bitcoin, because I always stand like in between, because like I have so many conversations, and I have the biggest treasury maxis on my podcast, I have the biggest freedom maxis on my podcast, and I always say it's like, I think like let me put it clearly. If Seyr, for example, because that's a person everyone knows about, if Seyr could come in 2020, just buy a bunch of Bitcoin and destroy the network, and be kind of like taking the freedom out of Bitcoin, then Bitcoin was never what it was supposed to be. Like if it's that easy, just takes one billionaire that speaks quite good to take the freedom away from Bitcoin. Bitcoin was never what we think it was. And so if you don't care or don't want to have to do anything with that, like TradFi and strategy and like all of those worlds, it's very easy, just like as you said, like don't give it any air because they might acquire more Bitcoin, they might go under, maybe they over leverage themselves, maybe they get nationalized by America. Like who cares? Bitcoin still works, Bitcoin is still going on. And it's that, because in my view, like Bitcoin has already won this kind of battle. And that's why I was curious how you think about that, because I don't think that even a Larry Fink has enough power to overthrow Bitcoin at this point. It has kind of like reached escape velocity. But now it's still very important to advocate for that, because their individuals give up their rights to self-custody and give up their rights to run their own nodes, and they don't have the freedom. So it's not that Bitcoin is losing it, but the individual person is kind of losing it. And so like always Bitcoin and self-custody first, run your own node, know exactly why Bitcoin is so important and the freedom aspects of it. If you then want to gamble 10% of your wealth in strategy and do some stretching, like go ahead, do that. I also play with some of that, but for me the base is always the vast majority should be freedom, should be self-custody, should run your own node, and should be this. And only if you've done that for multiple years, then you can do the other things.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. If they could have taken over and shut down Bitcoin or corrupted it in some way, then it wasn't what we thought it was, right? And I don't believe that they have. And also, just to be clear, like, I actually am glad for most of those structures. Like, I think Seyr has been a huge net positive for Bitcoin. Like, I think his efforts were a large reason why Wall Street started paying attention, and that his success has really moved institutional Bitcoin forward. And so I'm rooting for all aspects of Bitcoin, even institutional Bitcoin. It's just not for me, right? Maybe if you have a large amount of fiat that you've gained, or it's stuck in traditional structures or something like that, then I'm glad that these structures exist for you to have access to. I just think it's important, like you said, that we maintain the distinction that, that is institutional, sometimes paper Bitcoin, and that owning your own real Bitcoin and holding it in self-custody is its own thing.
Yeah, I would go even a little further. If it's not Bitcoin in self-custody where you run your own node, it's all paper Bitcoin. Like even if the exchange or whatever you're using is an amazing one that holds actually the Bitcoin and like associates with your account and like does all the amazing things, even then it's paper Bitcoin because it's not it's not yours.
Right. It's just owed to you, right? And they might have it, but you don't know what might happen to them. So yeah, I would agree with you.
Yeah. So if you don't have that, you can also buy Nvidia stock. Like at that point, it's just about making more purchasing power, and that's really like there's many solutions for that. You can also work harder, or like build a company, or like do all those things. But for me, the most exciting thing about Bitcoin is the freedom aspect. I don't want to bore you too long with that, but there's like three main aspects for me for Bitcoin. The one is retaining purchasing power, or like even gaining purchasing power. The number go up as we said. The third one is the community aspect of like, it's amazing that we have podcasts, that we have meetups, conferences, and there's all of like, it's a nice thing to have a social layer around that movement.
For sure. I love
but for me,
too.
but for me, the foundation is freedom. For me, the foundation to all of that is that we can self-custody it, that we can run your own node. And I also absolutely love that we currently discuss so openly and so wildly and also so toxically, which is, I think, a good thing, the BIP 110 thing, the core versus nodes thing, because you see the graphs of like how much nodes and how much core there is. I actually just see that more people are running their own node, and I'm like, that's amazing. Like that's really important. And I didn't see that, for example, in 2020 or 2021. People didn't talk about that much. Right now in Bitcoin, we're actually talking about running your own node. How amazing is that?
I agree with you. It's awesome. And whatever client you want to run, go ahead and run it. You're running a node. I think that's a win.
I would add one very small thing there. If if you run a client, whatever it is, that you actually know what you're doing with. And so because people are mad at me that I'm kind of fence sitting between core versus knots. I'm like, I said in the past often that I run both actually. My main one currently knots, but I'm happy to change my mind in the future. And I want more people to make up their own mind why to run a node and what implementation to run and what's the best. That's all I'm asking for people. And if we have a maximum amount of people that do that, I think Bitcoin will be more than fine.
Yeah, that's really, really how we win, is that the maximum number of people are doing that and participating. I'm also running knots. I came out very, very early against core. A lot of people got very upset with me for questioning core and how many people had merge access. And then that was almost 2 years now ago that I did that. But it's important, right? And yeah, be part of that conversation, be informed. And I don't want to say that I'm fence sitting. I am a little hesitant about an actual fork, and I really wish that we could come together and form a consensus. Core in my opinion is sort of the one that made the fork. They made a big change that most people didn't want. And maybe it wasn't a big change, but it was a change. And so that is its own conversation. But I agree with your conclusion, which is that it's really great to see more people participating in that, even if it's arguing. And that I hope that people will run a node and will get informed about both sides, all sides. And I hope that there are more solutions in the future. I know there's a couple of people out there working on new implementations that will be options in the future. And I'm glad to see that. I think that that's great. The more decentralized each piece of the ecosystem is, the better.
I love that you said that you're cautious, because this is literally, I wrote on Saturday such a long post about core versus knots and BIP 110. And I literally just said, I'm leaning towards BIP 110, but one, I'm not a technical expert, even though I started computer science and I'm a coder, but I don't think I'm a good enough expert to really judge it. So people just don't trust my opinion on that anyways. And then second is, I am always cautious of second order effects that we don't see right now with implementing something. And I got hammered from both sides.
It's tough to be honest, isn't it? I totally understand. I think I've also been attacked by both sides. I'm not sure there's anyone on the core side that cares for me in any way at this point. I'm very much, team knots, and I'm really glad to see what Ocean is doing with miner templates, and all of those things are super important. But I am, like I said, like you mentioned, I am cautious about a fork, and I am, am really hesitant to say for sure that I think that that's the right solution.
I just posted about that too. I have 9 miners running on Ocean. It's super cool, and it's the most. I mean, I probably shouldn't say that on the podcast, but that's kind of the downfall of having a podcast. You're giving a lot of data for free to everyone.
Right.
But I love those non-KYC Bitcoiners. Like nobody knows about it. It's the most freshest Bitcoin you can possibly get directly from Ocean. So I love them and I want to support them. So I take my small fault in privacy away and say I have miners running at Ocean. Don't come at me, tax officers.
Right. No, there's lots and lots of people who are doing the same. So I think it's okay for you to admit, and I think it's very important what they're doing. So it's important to advocate, to talk about supporting them and help raise awareness. And you have a great platform for that. So I'm glad that you are.
Now, I have one question that I ask usually just the first time around when a guest is coming out new in the podcast. But last time we had such an interesting and important topic that came up with, I forgot the name of that sickness that we talked about.
Yes, Lyme disease.
Lyme disease, yes. And so I will ask you the question again because I think maybe something interesting comes out. What can we learn from you besides Bitcoin?
Oh, I should have been more prepared for this, huh? Okay. I'm going to talk about in real life skills and maybe not relying on the internet, right? Because a lot of people think that I'm a lot younger than I am. I'm older than 40. I have been on the internet for most of my life, but I did grow up before the internet was really a thing. And when I was younger, when we first had the internet, you could only access the internet in this mythical place that used to be called the computer room. Um, so people who had computers in the 90s, they only had one computer and the family shared it. And if you were lucky enough to have like an office or a library or a space that was like a den, this is generally where the computer went. And you had the computer was physically plugged in. You had a landline with an Ethernet cable, and it was the only place that you could go to get on the internet. So you had to go into the room and sit at the computer, and you were dedicated to being there. It was glorious. And then when you left the computer and you left the computer room, there was no internet anywhere. It was not on your phone, it wasn't on your TV. Certainly none of your appliances were connected to it. There were not, Wi-Fi enabled devices up and down your street. I mean, it's just wild how like exponentially it's grown. So I am fighting to bring back the computer room. I think that people being perpetually online is not good for their health. It's not good. You have the EMF attacking you, you have the blue light. So I've started advocating for the return of the computer room. I have a hardwired internet in my office, and I do not even have Wi-Fi at my house. I have chickens now. I'm a big chicken advocate. So I'm advocating like a return to the 90s, which was much more of a blend of like life online for specific purposes. For example, to connect with friends the way that we are talking now. But then you walk away from the internet and you also focus on your real life and local communities, your own backyard, get a chicken or two, learn to grow some vegetables, know your neighbors, know your community. And so that's my non-Bitcoin thing that I am caring a lot about right now. I think it's going to become really important, more important than it is now. I think as the internet gets more and more locked down, as they take away more of our freedoms, I think you see more of an appetite and a desire for these communities and experiences and just the ability to unplug and say I'm not available right now. I mean, shoot, we had voicemail machines that sat connected to the phone, and I might travel for the weekend, and if you called me and left a message, I wouldn't get it for days until I returned home to my house and pressed play on that device. So I think a return of the analog and a sense of like online and offline is what I'm most excited for right now outside of Bitcoin.
There's this amazing Seinfeld episode where George left a message for a girl and she did not respond. So he left another one. And then
Yeah.
he came to know after like 3-4 days that she was just on a weekend trip somewhere and couldn't get to
Right.
his to the phone. And now he had all those angry messages and in their phone. And so he sneaked in the apartment and switched the tape and all of those things. Where when I look at that, because I got my first, I had like a not an iPhone, but like not a flip phone, like a a
A
movable phone
BlackBerry?
where
Oh,
a
the one that slid up.
yeah, like I think it was a
Yeah.
Sony, which was
Mhm.
like that, and then like it's slid up, and then the keyboard was down there.
Right.
A really slick device, honestly. I really like it. Was so fun to slide it up and down. So like I grew up with that, and my earliest memory is kind of like the internet being super expensive. So like I
Yeah.
always activated the internet only when I really needed it, because I
Yeah.
know like 10 minutes on it was like so expensive, and my mom would kill me if I like have it longer
Right.
on. And so now it's like if you don't have internet for like 10 minutes now, it's like horrible. Like people are sitting
Right.
in the plane, and they're like, what should I do? Like, thankfully there's Netflix somewhere offline, or like this is that there's
Right.
something here, and they cannot comprehend no internet. And this will change very soon with Starlink and all the planes. So I think internet will also be on the plane very normal. So it's really fun to see how quick this went. I mean, it's not that
Oh,
long
yeah.
ago that
Right.
we weren't even reachable on the phone, and now if someone doesn't respond in 20 minutes, we are angry.
Yeah. It is wild, and I think it's not good for anyone, right? It's not good for people to feel that amount of pressure to be constantly available. And then it's not good on the flip side because, as you mentioned in Seinfeld, like we get angry and we get worried, like, well, did I do something wrong? Like, have I offended them? Why are they mad at me? And it's like, well, they might just be busy. It might have nothing to do with you. I think it's not good all around. Like being reachable 24/7 is not a positive thing for anyone. And so I think that that's something we should push back against, and people should get comfortable being unreachable. Like, go to dinner, leave your phone at home, you will live. And let's bring back some of that, like, friction and delay in our lives. It slows things down, it makes people think more intentionally, and it allows us to be more in the moment and enjoy our life and look up and there's sunshine, or there's grass, touch grass, and these things exist for a reason because they really are very important.
I was also just in Prague and had three sit-down conversations for the podcast that
Uh-huh.
were not online. Like it was just like sitting down with a microphone, and it's
Yeah.
so different. And I would love for for me to have enough money to support that for every single episode, and like get guests into Vienna and all of that.
Yeah.
Maybe someday we will get to that point with my podcast also. But it's such a nice thing of having an in-person conversation that is not distracting. Even here, it's a
Yeah.
screen, like of the lights, and it's like there's things popping up left and right, and I'm
Right.
trying to focus on the conversation, and it's not always easy. Especially if you do it a lot, you get used to it, and so like you like deviate your thing
Yeah.
more often, and so ha- just like trying to get your life as real as possible is very important in this digital life. I don't think we. I don't think you have to put any efforts into getting it as digital as possible, because all the apps and companies are doing
Right.
that work
That's the
for you.
default now.
That's the new
Yeah.
default. Really
Right.
cool. As you know, or as you might know from previous appearances, we have an end routine in the podcast where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest actually is. And it fits so nicely. I can't believe that he actually asked that in that very framing. If you could have any superpower, what would that be? And what would you do with it to further Bitcoin and personal freedom? And he actually said personal freedom. I was like, that's
Wow.
freaking awesome. That, like, without knowing who you are, giving that question.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I would say, I don't know if this is considered a superpower, but I would like to be able to abolish government regulations, and I would abolish the BSA, which would immediately get rid of KYC and all of these tools that they use to spy on us. So, I mean, I'm gonna say that would be a superpower because that would just be incredible in so many ways. that people both do and don't understand. So that would be without question what I would do.
Yeah, I am just thinking of like what superpower you would need to execute that. Probably
Right.
the most.
Yeah, that's a
The,
little tricky if you go to like the traditional. I mean, I always wished I could fly. Like, I think flying would be I could fly to Vienna and have a chat with you in person, easily. So if you're talking like, Marvel superhero type things, then that's what I would like to do is fly. And I guess that's how I would promote freedom and Bitcoin is by flying to all the podcasts that I could and enjoying the view along the way and then having chats like this. But if we extend, the options of superpowers, then I would be the abolisher of government regulation.
maybe your superpower would be mind control, so you can get all the world leaders together to agree on what you want to do.
Oh boy. Maybe that would be one way, but I would honestly want it to be limited because that would be a wild. I don't think that I want to live in a world where anyone can do that, right? So
It's
we'll make sure that it's super limited.
absolute power. How is the sentence? Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Something like
Corrupts.
that.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
So I think if you give a person enough power, at some point he will misuse it for his own good, maybe for
Yeah.
his own good and for his own family good. And so, like, power always has to be limited, even with the most pure person on planet Earth that has only the good in his heart. Because humans look out for themselves, and there's that moment where he starts doing small things for himself, and then all of a sudden it's a bigger thing, a bigger thing, a bigger thing, and then you have a very corrupt person all of a sudden with
Yeah.
the world's power.
Yeah, it's true. It's actually exactly what I talked about in Prague. It was a couple years ago now, but when I came to Prague, I talked about my experience working in foreign direct investment and how the corruption happens just little by little and you don't really realize it's happening. It's a small thing that happens incrementally and all of a sudden you're in this massive scheme. So yeah, it's an important thing to remember and to think about, I think.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Michelle, for being on the podcast. Before I let you go, where can people find you, ask you questions, and reach out to you?
Yeah, just on X on Twitter is the only place that I really am. I do have a Nostr account, but I'm not real active over there. It's just hard to, be in so many different places. But I'm sort of perpetually online most of the time. I'm trying to take more time off of Twitter, but I'm on Twitter and my DMs are open. If you want to reach out, feel free to reach out. I do check my messages as often as I can. And yeah, use cash and keep fighting for freedom, please.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And what lovely last words. Thank you so much, Michelle, for being on. And also thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening, for joining us. So this always, I'll be back. This content is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute financial advice.